Last time we left off, we just finished talking about indeterminism in the sense of insufficient yet necessary conditions. Um, and the idea that if a baby is born, or a baby being born is uh, sufficient to determine that someone had someone had sex, right? But that having sex, while necessary, is by itself not sufficient to cause a child to be born, right? So there's an element of chance, right? This was one of the classical arguments for indeterminism, and it's this sense of indeterminism that rests behind Jean-Paul Sartre's um, view of existentialism. This time we're going to continue um, talking and discussing Sartre, but in the context of his notion of the self. Right. So Jean-Paul Sartre, born 1905, died 1980, was an existentialist philosopher. Right? And this means that existentialism is the philosophy that emphasizes the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible agent who determines their own development through choices of free will, right? Acts of the will. Now, for Sartre, his notion of the self is embedded in these acts of will and what he calls radical freedom. Right? And his notion of radical freedom is central to his notion of self, not just his idea of of indeterminism. For Sartre, radical freedom is the ability to self-determine moment to moment, right, who we are. Right? So we have the constant ability to uh, determine who we are, the nature, our own nature and everything. And this is given to us by the fact that our existence, man's existence, precedes his essence. Right? What this means is we're not born with a purpose, God-given or otherwise. We're just come into being as chance, as acts of random chance. And since our very birth is an act of random chance, we must determine the nature of our existence. Right? We must give it purpose ourselves. Um, so Despite this, however, being able to constantly determine our own our own nature, who we are, Sartre does believe that there are two means of basically acting in what he calls bad faith. Um, Bad faith being overdetermination, right, or self-deception, one might say, right, deceiving yourself about who you really are. And this sort of bad faith can occur in two ways. Right? It comes in two varieties. One, we can refuse to accept that certain actions make us a certain type of person when they're done consistently. Uh, so we might do cowardly things repeatedly, but deny that we are cowards. And in which case we're not being honest about ourselves, with ourselves about the type of person who we are. Right? We may have the ability to change that, but we can only change that given that we acknowledge it first. Right? So it's bad faith insofar as it's being dishonest with ourselves about ourselves. And then secondly, we can hold on to certain features. We can be honest about certain aspects of ourselves, but we can hold on to them so tightly that we think ourselves completely or irrevocably defined by them. Right? Um, an example of this would be calling ourselves a parent, right? Even when our child has died. Right? when they've died really young. We think of our, thinking of yourself as a parent. Well, you can't be a parent in absence of a child who you are a parent to, right? You were a parent, right? And that aspect that you were a parent may certainly be a big part of your identity, but continuing to think of yourself as a parent is bad faith. Right? Um, or think of astrology signs, right? Astrological signs, right? You're given a general list of character traits and you stick to them, right? You say that because I was born in these months, I'm a Taurus or a Sagittarius. And this means yada, yada, yada. So, of course, I'm going to be yada, yada, yada. Right? You think yourself unalterably defined by those features. And this is also bad faith because since we have this radical freedom to self-determine who we are, um, well, saying that you're stuck being one way or another is therefore false, according to Sartre.